I got a short story anyway, but before I tell it, I say Valentine's Day, a few years ago, when I first started storytelling, there was a group here in St. Pete called Wordier Than Thou, and they had an anti-Valentine's Day pub crawl. And they had a storyteller stationed at every pub they went to along Central Avenue. I was in the Queen's Head, I think. Anyway, and you were supposed to tell an anti-Valentine's Day story. And good thing the group was drunk. I told a joke that I turned into a story. I'm not telling that today. I didn't have very many Valentine's Day stories, but I think this is a Valentine's Day story. The year is 1946, and my father, Clyde Walt Belcher Sr., is stationed in France. The war has ended in 1945, but he stayed on a few months longer because he was an engineer, he was a sergeant, and he had a crew of German prisoners of war, and they were rebuilding the roads and bridges that they had destroyed in the rural area of France. And he did not speak German, and most of the Germans did not speak English. And there was this one young, he told me this story. There was one young guy, I think he called them all Jerrys, because that's what the British call the Germans, Jerrys. And the reason they call them Jerrys was because Jerry, there's a word that their helmets looked like chamber pots. And there was a word that translated Jerry, sounded like Jerry. Anyway, he called everybody Jerry. And this young kid, who was a German kid, German prisoner of war, well, he kept looking at my father and snickering and laughing. And this bothered my father. My father was a short man. He was only about 5'2", and he had a quick temper. And he didn't like this German kid laughing at him. And he would go over and grab the kid and say, get to work. And he gave him extra chores. He just did not like this kid, and he did not know why the kid was snickering at him. He thought it was because he was shorter than almost all of his prisoners. And maybe this little guy was telling everybody what to do. Now, my father was already in his 30s when he went to war. He volunteered because World War II was a big deal, and he stayed in 4 years, but he stayed longer. And he kept riding this kid, and one day the kid was noticing that my father would occasionally take a picture out of his pocket and look at it. And it was my mother's picture. It was back in the 1940s, you didn't have really great pictures. Pictures were like Kodak Polaroid pictures. But he had a little snapshot of my mother, and he would look at it every now and then. And one day, the prisoner, the young man, he through hand gestures and broken English, he wanted pencil and paper. And he took that picture, and my father took out the picture, and he drew a sketch of my mother in pencil from that picture. And it was on a 12 by 14 sheet brown paper. And it was fantastic. It was amazing. The kid was a natural born artist, and he gave it to my father, and my father looked at it, and he just couldn't believe it. It looked better than the photograph he had. And he rolled it up, and he kept it with him all the way till he got back to the country, and he gave it to my mother. Doesn't remember the kid's name, just that he was a Jerry. And he don't know what happened to the kid, but he told me this story, that this picture. So my father had married. He was older than my mother. He was about almost 7 years older. They were married, and they weren't going to have children. They had lived together. They were married in the early teens, and they both worked at the same place. She was only 17, turning 18 when she got married. He was about 7 years older than her, and they weren't going to have children. And when he came home from the war in 1946, going into 1946, well, 9 months after he came back, I was born. He changed his mind after being in the war, and he brought that picture back with it. And today it hangs in my hallway because I don't have a lot of pictures of my mother. And shortly after that, 1957, my mother came down with colon cancer, and she lingered a long time. It took 1960 she passed away. and I was 12, turning 13. And my memories of my mother are those days when she was in bed, wasting away. Back then there was no chemotherapy, it was radiation, and they burned a hole in her back, and she was bedridden for a long time. And I would like, I look at that picture, I think, I would like to know that woman. I would like to talk to her, I'd like to see her. She looks so happy, she looks so pretty. And so that's a Valentine's Day story. My picture.